I'm going to be honest with you guys. I did not have a plan for this episode today. I had no idea what I was going to do, what I was going to talk about. I was sitting on the couch yesterday trying to figure out what I wanted today's episode to be about, and I just got kind of stumped. My brain it's been a busy month, as you guys know. Busy month, busy week, everything. So I haven't had a lot of thinking time. And also, I've kind of already talked about everything that's been on my mind recently. That's the whole point of this. And what I don't want to do in these episodes is just make content for the sake of it, because it never actually performs as well as the content that I make genuinely from my heart. And so I don't want to do that. But I was thinking and reading Jeremiah this morning, and I was reading the part where they're finally exiled. Babylon finally breaks through the wall and finally takes over and finally gets into Jerusalem after all the warnings, all the repetition, all the chances that God, who was slow to anger and judgment, has given them. And finally, the Babylonians get in. And it was a long time. It was a long process. It was a long siege. But they get in, and everyone, like Zedekiah, his sons are killed right before him. His eyes are gouged out, and he is chained up and led away. And he had so many warnings. And you know what's crazy? Jeremiah told him, and this is not the point of this episode, but this is just my own thoughts right now. Jeremiah told him, if you surrender, you will go peacefully. And you know what happens? He doesn't surrender. And then what happens after that? His sons are killed before his eyes. Nebuchadnezzar brings Zedekiah over and then kills his sons in front of him. And then after that, gouges out his eyes, so now he can't see anymore, and then leads him off in chains to Babylon. When instead, he could have surrendered his pride and surrendered to the Babylonians and to the judgment that God was bringing on Israel, that he said, I will do this to you, and then I will set you free after, so you don't need to worry. You just need to surrender to my plan every single time. Just surrender your pride, surrender your pride, surrender your pride. Stop worshiping idols. Just simply surrender to the Babylonians. Stop making this harder for yourselves. I am trying to love you and protect you. I did everything for you, and you have turned against me, and so I have to punish you, because that is what a just, loving God does. I am disciplining you, and in that discipline, I am discipling you, because you are my ward, Israel. You are the ones who I have chosen you. And they cried out to him, and they tried to bribe, and they tried to manipulate God when it happened. They were like, oh my gosh, well, for your sake, protect us. For your name, for your title, for your reputation, please save us, God. And he was like, no, that's not the point. I want to make an example of you. I want this to be something people look at and shake their heads at. And then finally, you will realize, and you will come back into glory, and people will then see exactly who I am. I don't know where that came from, but it's just insane to me how they do that, how it works, how gross people can be. Ugh, I don't know. Pride is a dangerous thing. But that's the beginning. That's the groundworks. What I wanted to talk about, actually, was what happens to Jeremiah after. And what happens to Jeremiah when they are finally led away. Zedekiah loses horribly, terribly, badly, and is led away so much worse off than he would have been otherwise. He had promise and sanctuary and guarantee of sanctuary if he would have just listened to God. And instead he didn't. And so he got what was coming to him outside of God's protection. But what happened to Jeremiah was kind of incredible to me, because everyone around him is being led off to Babylon. The very poorest of the poor people are being left in Israel so that they can take care of the vineyards, so that ultimately Israel doesn't crash, because, hey, it's good land. So the Babylonians came in and they said, you guys, this select group, you poor people who don't mean anything, you stay here and you take care of the land so that it can yield its profit, and so that it's still generating, because we want land. We are conquering you. This is ultimately, we're under control of you. We're taking most of you back with us to be our slaves, but you guys can actually just stay here and keep working the land. You can do that. And what they did with Jeremiah was even different. They said, Nebuchadnezzar said himself to his captain of the guard, to his his guy in charge, he was like, go get Jeremiah and give him whatever he wants. Set him free. Give him whatever he wants. And so they gave Jeremiah two choices. You can come back under our protection and you can live in Babylon with us. You'll be perfectly fine. No one's going to touch you. You'll have the personal protection of me, captain of the guard. Or you can stay here and you can go back to the guy who we've left appointed as kind of like the leader here for now. And you can just hang out and live here back in your own home peacefully. You get to choose. And so Jeremiah chose that he wanted to stay back in Israel. So the guard gave him some food, gave him some money, and was like, all right, see you later. Bye. Enjoy life. And then they left. And then went back to Babylon. And then other people from surrounding nations who had fled, the other Israelites who were in the surrounding nations, came back after the Babylonians had gone and still continued to disobey and not listen to Jeremiah, who was continuing. After they asked for God's advice, by the way, they continued not listening. And Jeremiah was like, yeah, you're not going to listen. You don't listen to anything I say. And then they didn't. And then it was terrible for them. They really need to just listen to God. That's the whole point. But Jeremiah had a different story, a different outcome. And I have to ask, why? Why did he have a different story than the rest of Israel? Why did he have a different outcome? And here's the answer. Because God is just and God is good. And he gives everyone equal opportunity. And when it comes to the missions field, that's why it's so important, as a side note, for us to go out and be witnesses and ambassadors of Christ so that everyone gets the opportunity to hear about him, because he gives everyone these opportunities. And if there's no one to listen and to hear, he goes himself. But he gave Jeremiah a choice. And from the beginning, Jeremiah was living in this way, where Jeremiah was surrendering his pride and actively seeking life with God. Like we talked about last time, presence. He wanted God. We talked about presence, and then we talked about just the whole theme of this week, I guess, has just been closeness with Christ and presence in Christ in your life. And that's what Jeremiah did. He was present with God. He was present with Christ, and he, the entire time, was listening to God. And sometimes he was overwhelmed. Sometimes he was like, my friends are trying to kill me. Everyone around me hates me. I'm getting thrown in jail. I'm getting thrown in massive cisterns and then pulled back out and put back into jail just so that I don't die in a cistern. And this is a lot of weight. From the very beginning, one of the first things he says is, no, I can't do this. I'm too young. And reading that, I was like, oh, that's sometimes how I feel about this. But then God is like, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And he gives Jeremiah this voice, and he's speaking to the people through Jeremiah. And these days, we have the Bible. And so it takes a bit of a personality, and it takes a bit of a state of mind to be able to go out and talk about the Bible with other people. But that's something I can do. I don't need prophecy or revelation. I have the entire Bible to talk about, and that's what I'm doing right now. Jeremiah chose a life that was connected with God. And when he gave that offer to Zedekiah just did not even listen. He didn't want it. And he had no surrendering of his pride. And in that moment, that was just it for him. And so it didn't happen the way that it could have. But because Jeremiah was living with God and was walking with God, he actually had the opportunity to have the freedom that God provides and that God gives and that God promised all of them if they would just surrender. It took so long for God to actually finally make his move and act. He sent so many prophets to the Israelites before, and they rejected them over and over and over. And we saw that it broke God's heart. It made him sad, because where do you think we get emotions and feelings from? The creator of the universe. And how does he feel as the creator of the entire universe? If we feel hurt and loss and grief, how does he feel over all of creation, losing it and grieving it when we brought sin into the world and death entered the world? And Jesus was sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's how much grief and sadness and just brokenheartedness he felt. And he's God, actually God. And so God feels pain just like we do. And he gave them so many opportunities. And he's so slow to anger. And he's so slow. He gives us so many options and so many repetitions. People ask, how can a good God allow such bad things in the world? How can a good God allow this to go on and on and on, all these terrible things? Because he wants you to make a decision, and he's giving you as much time as he possibly can to let you make the decision to come to him. That's why. That's the answer. And Jeremiah answered that call. The Israelites did not. Zedekiah did not answer that call. And finally, instead of having that freedom and that peace that God was promising him, he did not do that. He didn't answer the call. And so finally his time was up and he left. In Exodus, how many times did Moses go to Pharaoh and send plagues before so that Pharaoh could make that decision to answer that call? And he did not. And then he died at the bottom of the sea because he didn't answer the call over and over and over. And his heart was hardened. And so God holds out over and over and over again for all of these different people, all these different characters throughout the entire Bible, saying, I'm calling you, I'm calling you, I'm calling you. Are you going to answer? In Revelation, he says, behold, I stand at the door and knock, and whoever hears me will let me in. And there will be a feast, we'll eat together. There's that communion, there is that connection, that personal connection with a real, living, physical Jesus, if we let him into our lives. That's what Jeremiah did. He answered that call. The Israelites did not. Pharaoh did not. Over and over and over again. 10 plagues, so many prophets, so much happening that he gave them over and over and over again so that they could see the opportunities that they had all of these times. And finally, he gives up. And he says, you know what? You've made your decision. Because he's looking at the heart. He's not looking at the things outside. He's looking at our hearts, and he can see that our hearts are hardening. And he can see that we are making this decision. And that's something that grieves me personally. I feel sadness over that. Because in the same way that I feel joy, like we were talking about in the last episode, where I'm feeling the joy of the Creator coming and rescuing me, even though I don't deserve it. And it's something that is so seemingly incomprehensible. Other people don't understand it and therefore reject it, but we make the decision to embrace it, even though we don't fully understand it sometimes. And it just blows our minds because you're feeling that love and it fills you up inside. It's the same thing because it's like, why would you reject that opportunity so many times? And that makes me really sad. It just makes me sad. And so that's why I make this podcast, because I want to have as many people as possible be able to hear this message and this good news. And it's different now than the way that I started it. When I started it, it's not what it used to be anymore. And it's better now than it was back then, than I thought it was going to be. Because I have changed as a person, but more importantly, God has used this work and His worked inside of me to change who I am. He's in this podcast. He's the one that's doing the work here, and I'm just the messenger. This entire thing I'm talking to you about right now is just based on some Bible passage I was reading this morning. It's nothing new. These are ancient documents, ancient texts. It was written so many years ago. But here I am today talking to you about the truth inside of it that is still living, that is persistent, that continues to be true in today's modern society and culture. We're not getting raided by the Babylonians right now, but everything about our lives is exactly the same. We're getting bombarded by stuff left and right outside of us, and He calls us every single day to make this choice. It's the choice. That's what the whole podcast is founded on. And in the beginning, I wanted people to just live their lives better. I wanted them to choose higher roads and higher callings. It was an optimism I had that these days definitely still exists, and it's still the foundation of this podcast. It's still the most popular episode on this podcast, but it's grown up now. I'll put it that way. It's grown up now. And all that's happened to it is that I have said, look at all these other things that exist now, and the choice is still the cure. It's still the same answer. The answer never changes, even though the problems do. And that's what's so beautiful about this. So I won't go on. I won't ramble, But I wanted you guys to kind of see this. I didn't have an episode for today, but this works so perfectly. And we don't need to script everything all the time. I can come on here and I can say, yo, I've messed up as a person. I'm a sinful person. I have sin nature inside of me, inside and out. And my life, because of Christ, is so different than it could be. I don't know who I would be without him. It's not even a real reality. Me without him, I don't know, because it's never been that way. I accepted Christ when I was 5, and it was the same feeling in me as a 5-year-old as it is now, and this is years and years later. So it doesn't change. It's the same answer. It's just you get older, the problems seem like they get bigger, but God is the same God when you were 5, when you're 20, when you're 50, and when Jeremiah was living, someday when all of us listening to this right now are dead and other people are still here. Maybe Christ even came back by that point. Who knows? But the point is that it doesn't change. He doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and always. He's perfectly sovereign. He understands everything, and he's giving you the opportunity to answer the call and make the choice. So that's my admonition for you today. I implore you to answer that call, just like we talked about last time. Let Jesus be your drive, because you feel how close and real he is inside your heart, and so you are driven by that. The feeling that creates in you. You are driven by that understanding, even when you don't feel it, that is there, that he is there, and that is what spurs you on to be the best person you can possibly be. You guys are awesome. You rock. We're the people that are going to change this world. I believe that. And I don't think the world is going to get any better, quite honestly. The Bible says it's not. It's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse until the day that he returns. But he calls us to continue being his people. He calls us to continue being the ones who are sharing his message, who are sharing his word, until we are whittled down one by one, killed for the things that we believe, for the things that we are proclaiming and refuse to recant. These are the things that he wants us to do. That's all we have to do. That's all he calls us to do. Go become fishers of men. Go start preaching and proclaiming this to the people. And so many people all around the world are dying right now, have died in the past for this. But this is something we cannot surrender, because it's the same answer that it was back then when the Israelites rejected it, when they tried to kill Jeremiah, when they killed the prophets, when they killed Jesus himself, for the exact same thing that all of these guys are saying. They're going to kill us too in the future. I believe that. And it's not going to get any prettier. It's not going to get any better. But this is all we have to do. And we're doing it from a place of love, from a place of wanting to. Not because we have to, because we want to. So, that's it. I'll leave you with that. Good luck doing this, just working on it. And I'll talk to you guys in the next episode.